Hello, everybody. My name's Steve New, and we're going to be talking about doing economics and management at Hertford College. And we hope you're going to enjoy the open day. We're not going to repeat everything about the economics and management course here because there's loads of information on the website which describes the nature of what you study when you're in Oxford. But we hope a little discussion here today will give a better idea of what it's like to study the subject at Hertford College. So I'm joined by Elizabeth Baldwin, who's our fellow in economics, and Elias Jarry, who's just about to go into the second year of the economics course, who's very kindly spared some of his summer vacation to come and help us talk to you today. So I've been at Hertford for a very, very long time, since we began the economics and management degree in the mid-90s. So I've had the great opportunity of seeing just generations of students come through this program, and we're really convinced it's a fantastic thing to study and people have a great time. But it's quite different to the experience of being a student in lots of other places. It's quite different, for example, to being on a business studies course at some other universities, because it's a very academic course. It shares a core of economics teaching with another degree in Oxford called PPE, where the economics teaching is essentially identical to that. So it's worthwhile just talking a bit about what it's like to be a student here. Elizabeth, I don't know whether you'd like to kick off with some general thoughts about, you've been here a bit less long than I have. What's your view of the economics and management course?
I think one of the key things about the economics and management course is that it's quite intensive and the students need to spend quite a lot of time doing work. Although we've got a full schedule of lectures and tutorials each week, really a lot of the time is spent by the students working on their own in the libraries or in their rooms, which is quite different from school. However, what's different then about Hertford compared with other colleges is the number of economics and management students take. We take 8 or 9 each year. So that means that there's going to be a group of you working together on the big difficult assignments all the time. And so it's just partly it's nice to have friends, of course, and partly it's nice to have people to throw ideas around with, because really you can learn as much from one another and your own approaches to the course as you do with the teachers. So that's one of the great things about doing economics and management at Hertford. Steve just mentioned PPE, the other course that does economics, which I also teach on as the economics fellow. We also take 8 or 9 students in PPE. So for the time you're spending doing economics, really you've got a very large cohort, one of the largest cohorts studying in economics in Oxford University. 18 or so may sound a small number to you, but in terms of number of students studying the same subject at a college in Oxford, it's huge. Of course, there are lots and lots of other students taking these courses across the university, but your college, because it's likely to be where you're living and likely to be your social group, it's the people you will see much more of and will form more of a kind of basis of support for working on your degree together with.
Yeah, and I think probably you can add to that, couldn't you, that it's not just the students in your year, because that's also the case across the other years of the degree. So there's a big community of folk doing that subject, which also means that there's a lot going on, because there's a lot of opportunity to interact across the years. And so Hertford over the years has had a very large amount of activity going on, with students organising things themselves, for example, bringing in speakers, working on projects, doing different kinds of activities. So there's a real centre of gravity. There's also, although we don't make as much of this as we should really, but there's also a community of MBA students and postgraduate students also studying similar things. And quite often we've been able to make networks, connections between those groups of students as well. I don't know, Elias, have you valued the idea of being in a bigger group while you've been a student?
Yeah, so I think it's been really nice having a large cohort. So, for example, if you go to a bit of a smaller college where there's perhaps 3 or 4 people a year, and maybe you don't get on with 1 or 2 of them, then it's quite hard to sort of get along and make friends. Whereas if you're at a larger college, there's a lot more people to talk to, and this applies to all years. So there's 8 in every year for both E&M and PPE, so there's quite a large cohort of economic students, which I find really nice. There's a lot of people to talk to about it, and a lot of people do help you out. It's not as if second years and third years don't give you anything at all. They really try and help you out. They appreciate and understand the situation you're in. So yeah, that's why I applied to Harvard, really.
I think that's an important thing, isn't it? Because the help you can get from other students is really important, because the transition to studying at university. I think studying university, any university, is a bit of a step change from what you know. But at Oxford, because there's this reliance on a lot of individual work and producing essays and doing work for the tutorial system, that transition can be more of a jump than maybe in some other places. You know, you're not very programmed here. The students have got to find their own pattern of work, and you've got to work out how to master complicated things, you know, under your own steam with the guidance of your tutors and with the lectures. So I think that's one really important thing about the college environment, is it gives you that community in which you can make that transition.
Yeah, I think that community is really important, and I think we've been trying to make the community of students studying economics to be a really happy, vibrant group. So we have a termly social with beer and pizza, and try and do some economics themed game, and I hope Elias enjoys those, and try and feel that we're actually a community together, which I think at another university where there might be a much larger number of students, well, a large number of students on the same course, but without that college, which is giving you a subset of that who are kind of your home group, then you would miss out on that kind of richness of experience potentially. Yeah,
and I guess actually going a bit further, extending the idea of the community, there's also the connection with people who've been students here before. What we call the alumni of the college is also an important thing. So, for example, some of our current students have been able to fix up to do internships and project work with former students, and during their summer vacations and so forth. And I've got a group of students at the moment who are doing a project working with one of the companies that I work with for my research work. So so I think having that college community really does matter a great deal. I think one thing that's also worth perhaps talking about is the fact that the nature of the course is an academic course and not a vocational one. I think often when we have open days, some of the questions I get from people who are thinking about this course as an alternative to studying management or business elsewhere, is that they often come with a preconception that it's a very vocationally oriented course. And I have to say, the NM course is not a vocationally oriented course. It's an academics, like a sort of multidisciplinary social science degree to do with economics and management, rather than like a kind of MBA vocational course. And I think that's quite interesting, because certainly for the management side of the course, it's very much about dealing with the research literature and reading academic papers almost from the word go when you start the course. And so the flavour of that course is quite, it's very traditional academic course, training of the mind, rather than doing the vocational things. And I think some students really, really value that, and it's a great preparation for what you do later on in life. But it might not be what every student wants. I don't know if it's featured for you, Elias. Did you think about the academic nature of the course when you were applying?
Yeah, so I think when I first got here, what I didn't fully appreciate was first of all, how sort of eclectic management is, and you learn about sociology, philosophy, and things that I'd never really considered before as being a part of the organisation of business, really. So coming in and learning about that was kind of a bit of a shock to me, just because I didn't probably fully do my research, fully didn't expect it. But actually, from when you first pick up an academic paper, for me it was a complete shock, really, and it's the first time I properly tried to engage in sort of a high-level discourse. Where probably the first paper I read, Steve, I remember it was on the meaningfulness of work, and I think I read about 20 pages of it, and about half a page went in. It was just too high level for me. But really, as the terms have gone by, I feel that I've definitely been able to read something and appreciate it a lot more, and actually understand it a lot more. So I'd say that's definitely something that you pick up quite well during your first year.
I mean, the economics teaching, perhaps Elizabeth, you could say a bit more. I mean, in Oxford, the economics teaching is very traditionally based, but I think it is changing over recent years as well, isn't it?
Yes, so one thing comparing economics and management here with straight economics at another university is, of course, that we've got this much more varied multi-social science approach going on the management side, as Steve mentioned, which is really good for stretching your mind, for thinking about and beyond the precise economic model you're studying. So economics, we build up technical models to think about the world, understand how those models work, and then critique them, think about what context they're relevant in and the limits to that relevance. That's really important.
Yeah.
And because understanding those models can be quite hard, it can be that people get all tied up entirely in the model and don't spend enough stretching their mind, critiquing them, thinking about when they're not relevant, thinking about how they could be improved. And I think all the additional social science philosophy training going on the management side really adds to the way students develop as economists. So that's a great reason to study economics and management here rather than straight economics elsewhere. Now, in terms of how we're changing the course to try and be a little bit more in that way, encouraging students to think beyond just narrow models. And it's important to learn these models because this is the way in which economics is done at a high level. We've got a new curriculum in the first year, which I've actually been involved with myself. I'm one of the lecturers in the first year, called the core curriculum, which builds up very much from asking questions about the world, looking at, for example, the Industrial Revolution, what's going on there. Suddenly the world really, from an economic and therefore from a human welfare perspective, completely changes from the 16th century up to the 21st. What's happened? What's the drivers there? And how can we pick apart some of those drivers and understand them more deeply? And so then what is the role of economic models to try and do that? So it's starting from the questions rather than starting from the models. That's very much what we're trying to build into economics now. So that's the first year. The second year, we go into more detail in some of the models and build up more detailed techniques, so that then for the third year, there's a real smorgasbord of interesting topics one can do. I teach on the public economics and environment courses, so students who find themselves really excited about questions about how government should best be involved in really important challenges facing us today. You'd be very welcome to join my courses, but you can go off and specialize in finance, you can specialize in economic history, there's more technical stuff with the game theory, there's money and banking, so a whole range of interesting things to do, which we build you up towards by learning these techniques.
So maybe we could move on to have a bit of a think about the admissions process. One thing to say, of course, is that because of the COVID-19 crisis, all the exact arrangements for how admissions are going to work in the coming year are a bit in the air at the moment. So we haven't really worked out exactly how it's going to work. But I suppose we could still talk a bit about what we're looking for and dispel some of the myths that people have about applying.
Yeah. I think the process and principles and what we're looking for are going to be exactly the same. The question is maybe whether the interview itself will be face-to-face or via a digital medium. But Steve and I have both found, by the way, that digital teaching, having tutorials over Teams or Zoom, actually works really well. And there are interesting things we've learned from that we're going to take back to our face-to-face teaching. So we think if the interviews are via a video chat, then that's not actually something to be too concerned about how well they'll work. It's just a question of whether you'll come and visit Oxford or not.
Yeah, and truth be told, we've done remote interviews for people in distant parts of the world for years and years now. So we've always been doing a small number of remote interviews. So I guess it has just been an extension of that. So let's just kick off to state the there's some basic maths of how the applications work, and of course it might all be different this coming year. We don't know how it's going to work out, but in previous years we take about 8 or 9 students for economics and management, and for that we probably get initially about somewhere between 120 and 150 applications, that sort of number. And we have to have a mechanism of getting from that big number down to a number which we can interview, because plausibly in the past, when we've been doing our previous arrangements for interviews, we can interview about 35 people or so in the time available. So we make use of the TSA test, the Thinking Skills Assessment Test, as a filter to get from the very large number of applicants down to the smaller number of people who will interview. So it's quite important to do well on the TSA test. We do make some accommodation allowances. So for people who've come from particularly challenging situations and so forth. Some, will read all the applications very, very carefully, and so there might be some people who do a bit less well on the TSA test who we still nevertheless interview. But for the most part, it's the TSA test provides the cutoff for giving us for the interview. When people come for interview, the obvious question is, well, what are you looking for? And the answer I always give is that really we're looking for people who who are likely to benefit from the type of teaching that we're going to offer. And that means there's a high premium on people who are interested in the subject and people who are curious and people who want to learn. So everybody, pretty much the whole field of the people who apply to us are really, really clever. We know that, and the applications are all spectacular. So the best we can do is use the interviews to try and find people who are really curious and interested and excited about the process. And really in the interview, as far as I'm concerned, that's really all we're really looking for. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to add to that.
So the way I structure my interviews is that I set a student a puzzle, and the point is this puzzle is meant to be hard, and I'm not expecting the student to get it right away. What I want to see is how they explore it, how they puzzle it through, how they react to hints from me, because I expect them to be given hints from me. I don't expect students to be able to do it on their own. If they can, then, I mean, that's kind of great for the student, but really it shows I've set too easy a puzzle, because I want that interaction between me and the student, because what I'm thinking about is how well is it going to go when I'm teaching this student in a tutorial. So it's like a little bit of a tutorial face to face. I want you to work through something difficult. I want to see how you can learn from me. I want to see if you can get to a satisfying ending point and see that you have learned something from this puzzle, that this puzzle isn't meant to simply be a kind of hoop to jump through, but actually it's something that we learn something from. So that's what I'm really looking for, is someone being excited by learning something there and the way they navigate that puzzling situation.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for management discussions, although sometimes we have kind of puzzly kind of questions, but sometimes it's a more general conversation. What I'm interested really is, does it look as though the students enjoying the conversation or not? And in particular, do they enjoy talking about something probably they haven't thought of before, from an angle they haven't thought of before? And I'm really not that bothered by where we end up in the conversation in terms of what answers students give. I'm more interested to try and get some sense, is the person enjoying this exploration or not? Elias, I don't know how you found, I can't, hand on heart, Elias, I'm afraid, because I've interviewed so many people over the years, I cannot remember exactly your interview and how it went, but I expect you probably can. So how did it go, and how did you find the process?
Yeah, so I think I was the first person on the given day to interview. So I had 2 interviews at Hartford, one management on the first day, and then I had my economics interview on the second day. So for the management interview, how it worked is I went in there and Steve just asked me what I was enjoying in school at the moment. And then we just talked a bit about physics, and then we talked about pressure in physics and how that related to pressure in work and management of labour. And then that's just where the conversation went. So sort of upon reflection, how it sort of works is just, well, for Hartford anyway, Steve just likes to, as he said, talk about anything really. He just needs to see how you respond. I didn't know that's how interviews normally worked. But yeah, that's definitely something that I wish I was told. It's probably a good bit of advice if you're trying to in at Hartford.
That's interesting, because what we said, because our plan is not to really have a economics interview and a management interview. But do a bit of both in each. But the way it works out, that might be what you experience, even though it's not quite what we plan. But broadly speaking, there are some colleges where there's a management one and an economics one, and we don't quite do it that way at Hartford. I mean, we could, but we generally don't. But did you find it threatening and intimidating, or was it friendly?
No.
Friendly.
That's probably one of the biggest myths that sort of needs to be dispelled. Is that it's not that bad at all. It's you just go in and you're sort of having a conversation with a leading academic. That if you're seeing the interview for anything, just see it as that. It's that you're getting this amazing opportunity to talk to these academics. And if you don't get in, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you've had this wonderful experience. So definitely apply if you're thinking of doing that, because the interviews are quite fun, I thought.
Okay, they do involve. I mean, when they come in person, they do involve a bit of hanging around, don't they? That's the other unfortunate feature of our in-person interviewing. Is actually you turn up in Oxford and you're only being interviewed for a short, a couple of short bursts, but there's a lot of hanging around. Was that interesting in meeting the other people when you came up?
Yeah, so I'd say when you come to interview, a lot of people were just sort of hanging out in the JCR, which is it's called the Junior Common Room. It's something we have within college where sort of the whole undergraduate community has access to, and sort of a bit of a social space in college. So when I came to interview, a lot of people were just sort of hanging out there, and that's pretty much what I did for the whole of my interviews. Actually, looking back, a lot of the people that were just trying to revise an article from the Financial Times to try and appear interesting in their interview didn't get in.
That's a really good point, Elias. We don't want students to revise for these interviews because we're looking at where you are going forward. We're not really interested in what you know now. We know you've got to know stuff because you've got to do well in your A levels, and that will happen as well. But in particular, not everyone is doing economics A level who comes and studies this course, and I will not be assessing economics knowledge in the interview. I'm perfectly happy if you don't have any economics knowledge, and I try and structure the puzzles so that it doesn't matter whether you have economics knowledge or not. So really don't cram for these interviews. It's much more important, as Elias says, that you feel relaxed and happy when you come into them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, occasionally we do have people coming to interviews who've clearly practiced a great deal and have got a little speech they want to give. And I like to think, because I've been doing it a long time, as soon as I can work out what's going on, and as soon as someone starts a little speech, I can say, well, thanks very much, but let's talk about something else and go off in some other tangential direction. And so I think the interviews are absolutely terrible devices for working out if people are clever. And that would be redundant anyway, because we already know from the applications that people are really, really clever. I mean, there's no doubt in terms of just raw cleverness, all the applicants who are applying would be fine. The only differentiating thing we want to look for is someone really interested. Are they keen to come and learn more? And do we think they get on okay in the tutorial system? So I'm absolutely sure we are not very good at this process. We do our best. Somehow we've got to get down from a big number to a small number. So once people have been interviewed twice, the people who've been doing the interviews get together and we compare notes and we kind of identify who we think might be best. But to be perfectly honest, it's a really tough job. It's not obvious, and it might be a bit deflating, this, Elias. I don't want to put you down or make you feel miserable, but it could well be that we ended up opting to make you an offer. But if by mistake in the post, we'd offered it to somebody else in the list, probably, as far as our experience, it wouldn't make that much difference. So there's an element of luck in this. It's we're very glad, by the way, that you're here. And I'm very pleased to hear this. But it's not that there's something magical about the people who get in. It's just we're doing our best to try and find people who we, in our imperfect way, are going to get there. And I really like the point you said about just giving a shot. When I was a sixth former, I applied to come to Oxford and I didn't get in. And for a long time, I wondered what I did wrong. And it's only now I'm on the other side of the table, as it were, having come back to Oxford as a grown-up, that I realised I probably didn't do anything wrong. It was just the way it worked out. And it's worth giving it a shot because it's a wonderful thing if it comes off. And if it doesn't come off, it doesn't really matter because you can go to another brilliant university and have a great experience elsewhere. So it's worth trying. It's certainly not worth not trying because of a fear of it not working out. Because why not give it a go? Is the way I would see it. I think some people struggle because relatives or teachers trying to be helpful. If people apply and they don't get in, they say, what do you think happened? What went wrong? And the answer is, probably nothing went wrong. It's just really difficult to make a judgment between people where what we're looking for is how hungry people are to learn.
We'd rather people didn't prepare on the whole. We just want to see what you're like.
Yeah.
And certainly if your school is not giving you preparation help, don't consider that to be a disadvantage because you're then coming in, as we were hoping, fresh.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, absolutely right. And we're not assessing how much you know about stuff.
Absolutely not.
We're
We
interested
want to see where
in,
you're going, not where you've been.
yeah, and curiosity and enthusiasm and interest is right. And also, we've been doing it a long time, so we kind of think, again, we're probably imperfect, but we think we're quite good at working out when people are really nervous, and so we can make allowances for that. We also say to people, if they think they do an interview and it doesn't go very well and they want another interview, we'll give them a chance for another interview if they want. We'll scrub the first one and they can have a repeat, because people do get nervous in these situations. We understand.
One thing that people ask about is the personal statement. I would suggest that you write your personal statement thinking about your other applications, because at Oxford we get to meet you, we get to talk to you, so we're rather less interested in the personal statement. Other universities, because they won't get to meet you, they'll be reading that more carefully.
If we were hiring people in a job interview situation, you'd do it quite differently. Then things like, are you a full-rounded person would be very important. But actually, we're not really interested in that, because people,
well, we are. We're interested in someone as a person. We're just not interested in whether they had the opportunity to play in the National Youth Orchestra.
Exactly correct. Or if people have climbed Kilimanjaro carrying a cello or something. We don't care about that. But what we're interested in is, are people curious and interested to learn? That's the thing. I should perhaps also say, when on personal statements, is a lot of our applicants for E&M are also applying for straight economics degrees at other universities, where the personal statement really does matter for the application. And so if you want to write a personal statement which is all about economics and you don't mention management at all, that's fine. That won't be held against you whatsoever, in terms of the personal statement.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely vouch for that as well, on both of those points, in that I didn't get any practice interviews and I didn't mention management in my personal statement, and I managed to get in somehow. So yeah, it is possible.
Yeah, I mean, we do in the interviews. It's not, we certainly won't be testing whether you know much about management or business in the interview, but we might be interested to find out if you're interested in it. And as a proxy for that, are you also interested in what's going on in the world? So sometimes we do end up talking a bit about current affairs and what's going on in the, we might be interested to know what you think about the relationship between business and climate change. Not that you can give us an essay about what's going on, but if you have some thoughts about that as an issue, then that probably is indicating that you're interested in it. But it's much more about the level of curiosity than fixed knowledge.
Great.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Elias. Is there anything else you would say to applicants, Elias, if you wanted to encourage people to make an application?
I'd say just give it a go. I think what I definitely advise is have a go at a couple of TSAs, see how you're doing. Just apply. I think, on best advice, because you never know what's going to happen, and it is a really good degree to get onto. So yeah, just apply.
Okay, thanks so much indeed. Of course, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask about the applications, there's lots of people in Oxford keen to take your questions. And so, for example, the College Admissions Office is always happy to take any inquiries anybody might have. So,
and I will be available on live chat. I don't know if you're doing this, Steve. During the official open days, and the times that I'm available will be published on the website.
Yep, me too. Yeah. So if people want to pick up any of these ideas or ask other questions, we'll be delighted to do that. Okay, thanks so much indeed, everybody. Thank you.